Greetings, friends. Today's talk is going to be, well, a little bit different than past talks. It won't be based on any particular sutta. Rather, I think I'm going to be using the Wednesday talks primarily for talking about questions that have come up, whether it's at our classes in Frenchtown or through online students. And discussions that have come up too. Also, at least for this week, I may be changing the platform that I'm using shortly, but so that there can be more interaction between those of you that are online and myself. But for today, if there's any questions, you can go to becoming-buddha.com and linked at the top menu. You'll see that there's a choice for live chat. You can ask me some questions or make some comments. And also, this talk is loosely based on an article on the website called An Eightfold Path, A Complete Practice. And that's linked in the top menu under the category Eightfold Path. So a very common question that comes up, especially for people beginning a Dhamma practice, but even well-seasoned meditators, is simply difficulties and distractions that come up during meditation. So it's important to remember that the Buddha did not just teach meditation alone. And there's some inherent difficulties in just meditating without developing the entire Eightfold Path. The Buddha taught an Eightfold Path to overcome the common human problem of ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And the prevailing aspect of ignorance is a conditioned mind that creates very powerful but very subtle strategies to ignore its own ignorance. And so during meditation, that comes up in many different ways, all resulting in ongoing distraction, meaning it's very, very difficult to develop a well-concentrated mind without the entire framework of the Eightfold Path. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why the Buddha taught an Eightfold Path and did not just teach to different meditation techniques and to use these techniques to find an inner Buddha nature or develop Buddhahood or to have mystical or magical experiences. The Buddha taught nothing like that. He taught meditation for a very specific reason, to deepen concentration. And the meditation method that he taught for the 45 years of his teaching career was one singular method called shamatha vipassana meditation. Shamatha means to quiet the mind. Vipassana means to gain insight. And it's a very specific insight into something called the three marks of existence. Those of you that are new to my teachings, there's articles about all these things that I'm mentioning right now. So he taught an Eightfold Path to overcome the common human problem of conditioned thinking rooted in ignorance. And if you consider that, what I just said carefully, a mind that is rooted in ignorance is a deluded mind, and a deluded mind has no way of understanding its own delusion. How would a deluded mind know that it's deluded? Well, the Buddha recognized that problem. And so he taught an Eightfold Path as a framework for recognizing and abandoning deluded thinking, ongoing deluded thinking. So in meditation, it often arises that fear might arise, one of the hindrances might arise, such as the constant need for sensory input. That's just another word for the need for distraction. When boredom arises during meditation, it really is that immediate need. Right now, I need to be distracted. We find it very difficult to just sit quietly and be mindful of the breath for any period of time. So we might be distracted about thoughts arising from the past, or worry about something coming up in the future. We may be stuck on something that came up during our day. It might be an argument we had with someone, an unpleasant experience. It could be an almost endless number of things that the mind, rooted in ignorance, will use to distract itself. When we start developing the Eightfold Path as the complete practice, again, it's not just meditation, Beginning with the initial understanding of right view is simply accepting that the views we've developed about ourselves in relation to the world, let me put it this way, simply aren't working. Nobody would come to a meditation or a mindfulness practice, or certainly to the Buddhist teachings, if they didn't feel there was something missing in their life, or maybe that there's something wrong with how they were experiencing their life. We all come to a meditation or a mindfulness practice, or to Buddhism, because we think that there is something basically missing in our life. And if we can accept the fact that what is missing in relation to what the Buddha taught is a profound understanding of Four Noble Truths, that's the beginning of right view. And if we bring that view into meditation, then our meditation won't be clouded by the need for stimulation, or for having an experience, or for gaining a general type of insight. The next factor of the Eightfold Path then is right intention. And right intention relates directly to the Second Noble Truth. The Second Noble Truth states that craving originates and clinging perpetuates the ongoing experience of suffering, of dukkha in the world. So right intention is the intention to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. When we hold that intention in our meditation practice, that guides our practice to keep it very simple and to simply be using it to develop concentration. The reason why is when we understand that a mind that is well concentrated can recognize when craving arises and clinging is present, clinging to wrong views. The next three factors of the Eightfold Path, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, are taught not so much for moral reasons, although that's very important. It is when we are mindful of the unskillful applications of speech, action, and livelihood, to put another way, the hurtful sides or the wrong side. And again, I'm using three different descriptions to take it a little bit away from moral teachings and more practical teachings. When we're mindful of right speech, right action, or right livelihood, and when we're in the unskillful aspects of those, it's at that point that we can recognize where craving and clinging is arising. And craving and clinging rooted in ignorance is always an ongoing attempt to establish a self rooted in wrong views. The Buddha described that self as anatta, not a self worth maintaining. So as our minds become more well concentrated from a right meditation, from shamatha vipassana meditation, we're able to hold in mind the entire Eightfold Path and recognize where we're continuing eye-making, where we're craving for and clinging to the establishment of a self rooted in ignorance. The sixth factor of the Eightfold Path, right effort, reminds us that we need to, and again, this is how the Buddha taught it, we need to develop a meditation practice, but we also need to develop the entire framework of the Eightfold Path as our meditation, as our Dhamma practice. Right mindfulness is the seventh factor. When teaching right mindfulness, the Buddha's words are to be mindful when in wrong view and enter and remain in right view. To be mindful when in wrong intention, meaning any intention that is continuing to establish a self-referential ego self. To be mindful of wrong intention and enter and remain in right intention. To be mindful when engaged in wrong speech and enter and remain in right speech. And this is how he described each factor of the Eightfold Path in relation to right mindfulness. So the Buddha taught mindfulness in many different suttas. The two most often cited are the Satipatthana Sutta, the Sutta on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, and the Anapanasati Sutta, which is really a subset of the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta, because mindfulness of the breath is taught in both of those suttas. The last factor, again, of the Eightfold Path is right meditation. And so when difficulties arise during our meditation practice, we can always look back at the framework of the Eightfold Path and what is missing. And often what is missing immediately in meditation, when we feel like we're just too distracted, or we can't maintain mindfulness of the breath for more than just a couple of breaths, it's because the intention has somehow gotten corrupted. And our attention then in meditation is often for escape or release from an unpleasant quality of mind, or seeking some type of magical or mystical experience, rather than engaging in meditation with the right intention to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. And so how does that manifest in a deepening, a mind that is developing ever deeper concentration? As we're sitting in meditation and we find that we're caught up in our thinking again, we simply come back to the sensation of breathing. And in that moment, we're interrupting conditioned mind's need for continual distraction and continued ignorance of Four Noble Truths. In the next moment, we might find that we're caught up in our thinking again. And it's usually at that point that we start getting frustrated. And at that point of frustration, we can really lose our focus. But if it's in that moment that we remember, what is my intention here? My intention in meditation is to simply deepen concentration. And that aspect of right intention then brings us right back to our breath. And when we maintain that right intention and practice restraint of trying to figure out and analyze, and I'll just use a phrase here, analyze what has gone wrong. What has gone wrong is we simply lost the intention, the right intention of what we bring into our meditation practice. So it's often very important to remember the purpose of meditation. Again, I'm overemphasizing this today, that it's not for having any type of experience. It's not to find an inner Buddha nature or develop Buddhahood. It's one tool. It's one factor of 8. And the purpose of meditation is to deepen concentration. And every time during meditation, we recognize that we're caught up in our thinking again, and we come back to the sensation of breathing, we're emphasizing right intention, meaning we're developing the intention within our meditation practice to use it only for deepening concentration. So when we're struggling with our meditation, when it seems like and one meditation session it doesn't seem to be, when we're struggling with a meditation practice, whether it's one session or it's going on for days, maybe even weeks, it's always best to look at how well are we integrating the entire practice of the Eightfold Path. Remember, the Buddha taught an Eightfold Path as a way of developing the profound understanding of Four Noble Truths, and it is the entire Eightfold Path that's developed awakening or full human maturity. Meditation is a singularly important factor, but not to be taken out of context, and not we can put too much pressure on our meditation practice if we do not develop the entire framework of the Eightfold Path. That takes time. The Eightfold Path is not something that we read once, memorize what it is, and then leave it at that. In fact, it's one of the major problems with modern Buddhism is that the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path are, if they're even taught, and they're not often taught, even when they are taught, they're taught as something that, often taught that they're not, they're archaic teachings, they're a preliminary practice, and they're not something that we need to be too concerned about, when in fact the Buddha taught for the 45 years of his teaching career, the only path he ever taught was the Eightfold Path. And so as our concentration deepens and we're able to gradually integrate each factor of the Eightfold Path, our meditation practice becomes the entire integration of the Eightfold Path supports our deepening concentration, and as concentration deepens, that allows us to hold in mind the refined mindfulness of all 8 factors of the Eightfold Path. So just to put the final point on this, whenever our meditation practice is, whenever we're having some difficulties in our meditation practice, it's always skillful to look at where are we lacking in integrating the Eightfold Path as the framework for living our lives. As our framework of integrating the Eightfold Path for living our lives develops, we will have a direct experience of a well-concentrated, peaceful mind, and that will reflect itself in our moment-by-moment life. Often in our classes in Frenchtown and from my online students, it's the expression of developing the Eightfold Path is a very practical one. We recognize as our life is unfolding moment by moment that we simply are well concentrated, that we're not as reactive as we were. We're more present with other people. And even the mundane aspects of life seem to be having much more meaning. And that's simply because we're more present with our life, which is ultimately what the Buddha taught, is how to live our life moment by moment as our life unfolds within the framework of the Eightfold Path, and ultimately seeing our life from the point of view of right view. When the Buddha described right view through the from an awakened right view, he described that view as a view that profoundly understands the nature of suffering. And what that really means is a profound understanding of anicca, of impermanence, meaning that all things that arise are subject to cessation. Everything that arises passes away. And I'll conclude with this, and that brings us again back to meditation. When we're using meditation properly, and as our concentration deepens, the profound understanding of the arising and passing away is experienced directly by simply experiencing the breath, the arising, the inhalation, and the passing away, the exhalation. And in that way, and in that breath, we're experiencing the arising and passing away of all phenomena. And in a few weeks, I'll give a talk related to the 4 foundations of mindfulness again, and the Anapanasati Sutta. But that's exactly how the Buddha described to be mindful of the breath. In modern Buddhism, both of those suttas have been misapplied and used to describe breath meditations that are taken way out of context, rather than just simply being mindful of the breath in the body during our meditation practice. So I hope you found this talk helpful. The important thing to remember is that when there's ever any difficulty during a meditation practice, to treat yourself very gently. Don't judge yourself harshly. Don't judge the practice harshly, but just understand that a deepening meditation practice requires a deepening integration of the entire Eightfold Path. And as the Eightfold Path is more fully integrated into our lives, the more simple and more effective our meditation practice will be. So thank you for listening. Have a wonderful holiday, everyone that's online. I did mention in the email that if anybody has any questions or comments, you can go to becoming-buddha.com under contacts and newsletters. Click on that, and you'll see an opportunity to chat with me under, I think it's called Becoming Buddha Chat. First time I'm using it, so I'll try it out, and I'll go to that website right now. And everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope to see you next week. Peace. Oh, the website. Hmm. It doesn't look like it's working. So I'm sorry, folks. Again, this is the first time I've tried this. Doesn't seem to be working. Well, I'll look into it. Maybe we can use it next week. If you have any questions or comments, you can always send me an email. Have a wonderful holiday.